They've changed the recording to my voice. Oh,
no. There it goes. Recording is on, and here we are. Woo! All right, December 14th, 2020, the last ISC Squared Central Florida meeting for 2020. Hopefully 2021 will get a little better. I heard they were giving out the first vaccine shot today, so hopefully we're starting to get to see some light at the end of this crazy tunnel that we're all in. So first of all, welcome to everyone to our virtual meeting here tonight. I got about 38 folks on, which is good turnout. I have a feeling more folks will start getting connected as we go through. So first of all, kind of rundown on how we're going to play this tonight. I'm going to run through some announcements. I'm going to turn it on over to Rick Payne. Sorry, I wrote Ricky there. To Rick Payne, he's going to talk to us about DevSecOps. If you had the opportunity to watch him at B-Sides Orlando in his presentation, then this is completely different. He's completely redone the whole presentation for all of us. And then afterward, we're going to hear from Tara Hughes regarding Imposter Syndrome. Very cool stuff. I know it's an issue that a lot of folks kind of deal with, and if you've never heard of it, then you're probably in a good spot. But just again, for professional development, I think it'll be worthwhile to pay attention. And then we should be able to wrap this up by about 8:30 or so. First of all, I got to say a special thanks, shout out to Andy Jalbert over at 8x8 with regards to helping us with this platform. Andy, I know you're on. Go ahead and give us 30 seconds about what 8x8 does.
Hello, friends. Andy Jalbert, 8x8. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas. We are a global, publicly traded, unified communications and contact center solution that takes security very seriously. Appreciate your sponsorship, and Merry Christmas.
Cool. Thanks. We all take security very seriously. Just ask SolarWinds, right? Too soon? All right. Anyway. So speaking of taking security very seriously, we can't do this without all the sponsors that we've got, including 8x8. Local folks like Gold Sky with Ron and Phil, ISG with Mr. Bob Henderson, who, if you haven't had a chance to check out the CSNP, Cybersecurity Nonprofit Group, they are meeting once a month as well. I need to, now that I've said that out loud, I need to add them to my slide that we're going to see up and coming. But yeah, with the help of these other organizations, allow us to put on events. Right now, we're kind of in limbo with, we're not feeding everybody, which is kind of a bummer because that's always a fun part of these meetings. But hopefully, if we get back face to face when that time comes, we'll be reaching out to our sponsors to help us out with those kind of events as well. If this is your first time here attending, I think we may have some new folks. Certainly want to welcome you and thank you for joining one of the best Central Florida chapters, information security chapters here in Central Florida. But basically, the way our chapters run is built on 4 different pillars: connect, educate, inspire, secure. You can see the different ways the way that works there on the screen. Essentially, tonight, we're going to get you connected, hopefully get an opportunity. We have the chat window, so you're welcome to chat while we're going on with the presentations. If you got questions, that's a great way to do it. Say hello, great way to reach out. Say hello to other folks, and then get you some education with what we're going to hear from Rick and Tara. That'll hopefully inspire you to work more securely. All right. So if we haven't met in real life, my name is James McQuiggan. I'm the chapter president. We've got Christopher Hickernell who's on. He's the guy in the white shirt waving. He's the one that will handle your CPEs for you at the end of the meeting, and he does a fantastic job with that. We'll talk about that towards the end. Got Walter Spielman, who is our vice president. Got Paul O'Connor, who's our treasurer. We have Debbie, who's our secretary. I think Tom's on as well. And I don't know if I saw Amy was on or not, but Amy handles our sponsorship. But all of them, we're here to support you and provide you a great opportunity for education, connection, and all that other good stuff. So, good times. All right. So let's talk about some upcoming events that we've got going on here. Well, right now, I've kind of just laid out for the next 6 months that we're all virtual. I'm hoping that changes. We're going to see how things go. For those of you that know me, know that I teach over at Valencia College. We are still virtual there this coming semester for the spring. So hopefully by the summer, we might be back in person. I don't know yet. I would like to get back as soon as possible, maybe even up at ECPI, Full Sail, wherever. But we just kind of got to be careful. We don't need to be super spreaders. So right now, this is kind of the game plan. The fourth Monday of the month. The next one is set for January 25th, and we are going to have Clay Posey from UCF and they've got it's not Rapid7, but they have another company that they have. They're going to talk about impacts of COVID, working from home, phishing attacks, that kind of stuff. They've done a whole study. And I wanted to have them present last month, but communication fell through. So we're going to have them present in January, and we're still working on another presenter for January as well. So if you have a topic you want to present and would love to get in front of an audience, we have a great group of members that would love to hear from you. So if you're interested, drop me an email or one of the other officers, or an email at info@ISC2chapter-centralflorida.org. Visit the website. You can find the emails there. But kind of right now, we're kind of staying on track with what we got with the virtual meetings until we know we can get back face to face. And when that happens, we might transition, do a combination of both. Myself and the board, we're still trying to work out the logistics of all that. Once we know, you will know, and we'll go from there. Okay, so one of the things we're going to do in February, because we usually have two speakers, but taking the place of one of the speakers in February is we are going to kind of kick off a book club. We picked it last month. If you were part of the meeting, we did a poll, and Sandworm was the book that was selected. And this is written by Andy Samberg. Very interesting book, book that he's written about regarding a lot of the different attacks that occurred with the Ukraine, with NotPetya, and just real neat, interesting insights. Really well written, and that's available. So what we're looking for is, come January, people that have hopefully read the book by then, that would be interested in participating in a panel. And we'll have a discussion about it with regards to it. We're still working out the logistics, what we'll talk about, but we're looking for folks that will have read the book. So get your copy at your local bookstore, get it online, whatever. But we're going to probably have 4 folks that will be a part of the panel. So a great way to get in front of people and present, network, and help educate as well. So Sandworm's the book that we're doing. If we don't end up getting enough or getting anybody, I may just start kind of reaching out and poking on people's shoulders going, hey, read the book? You want to read the book? Get folks to participate that way. So one of the things that we're going to have coming out, Tom is going to lead this effort, this is something that's been well asked by a lot of folks, is a CISSP study group. Looking to try and figure out a way to meet periodically, safely, of course, where we'd have somebody facilitating, answering questions, leading the discussion. We're going to open it up to our current members and anybody that wants to work towards that certification. But we will need volunteers. We can't do this just as the board, so we're going to need some help from everybody else. So if you're interested in helping, if you're interested in being a part of the study group, but B, if you're also willing to help facilitate, that's what's going to allow us to do this kind of study group. We know we've got a lot of people that want to work towards the CISSP. We just need to have people that can help facilitate that. And if you are interested, please let us know. You can email education at our ISC2 chapter email address. Okay. Real quick, I know the ISSA, I know Patrick's on the line, ISACA and CitraSec. I think ISSA is off this month. They're not doing any presentations because of they would have had a Christmas party, I know, in the past. But I think they're all coming back in 2021. So also CSNP, you can find them on LinkedIn. I've got to add them to this. But they do events on a monthly basis as well. CSNP, go to, I think it's csnp.org. You can see all the different events they've got going on. If you know people that are working towards getting a degree in information security, cybersecurity, the Center for Cyber Safety and Education, which I'm a board member of, they've now just opened up 4 new scholarships. The Know Before Black American scholarships for women, Know Before Women, and then the Cyber Warrior Scholarships. These are all open. You can go out to safeandsecureonline.org, go to the scholarship section, find out more information about that, especially if you know people that are working towards looking to get additional funding to pursue their education and work in this wonderful field that we're in. Now, Rick, I know you had asked me before about job positions. A couple of folks had emailed me, so this is kind of new territory I'm branching into, but CISA is looking for people to work for them. Students, actually, high school students. This is in Pensacola and Arlington, so you've got to be in that location. This is not a remote, but salary starting at $35K to 63. So high school students got a good chance to get paid. Internships that are available. I'll have the deck available later on today, but you can go out and visit that. Also, you can Google and have a look at the CISA site for those job announcements. One of our other members, Tom Turo, chapter members, he emailed me last week. He's got a senior risk assessor looking to join Advent Health, work in the hospitals, physician practices, ad hoc security risk assessments. They're looking for a rock star that understands the healthcare environment and some experience with GRC. They were hoping to look for hopefully looking to get somebody by the end of the month and get them going in Q1. So if you know somebody that works in healthcare, drop me an email, but the link is in here once the deck goes out as well. Okay, real quick, I'm running out of time here. 241 active members. We've had a bunch of new folks join. Thank you very much for being a part of the chapter. Looking forward to getting to meet you face-to-face one day. For those folks that are interested in helping educate for the CISSP, you could also help with the Making ISC Squared exams, coming up with the questions. Visit community.isc2.org for more information. The group hubs, we've got that started. We've had some folks join up, but you can join the community.isc2.org website as long as you're a chapter member with us. And then you create an account, and then you send an email to us over at info@isc2chapter-Central Florida. Let us know what your username is, and then we will send you the invite and join that group hub. We're going to start using that as another communication method going forward. Okay, not to get too far behind, but I'm real excited that we've got Rick Payne here, fellow CISSP, and he's worked with me at the Florida Cyber Alliance, the cyber camps. That's where I first got to meet him. Had him keynote there one year as well, which was great. And he just recently presented at B-Sides. Saw his presentation. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. This will be something worthwhile for all of you to see and hear from Rick regarding his path that he's been on. And I'm real excited that he's here. Ricky, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so you can take over.
Absolutely.
And let you take it away here. But like I said, Rick's got a great story, great information. If you saw this at B-Sides Orlando, don't worry, he's changed a couple slides so that you can learn from him and everything else. So Rick, I turn it over to you, sir.
Did we get to share? Did that go through?
Yeah, I believe I can.
Okay, we're live. So I got to turn my camera back on. Is that what we did earlier?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I can see it.
So you got me in the slides?
Yep.
Beautiful. All right. I'm going to move you guys over so I can see you too. So like you said, like Tara had a good point earlier with making these slides timeless and classic. So what I did is I tried to generalize this. This is the PDF I was going to do in PowerPoint, but I had difficulties presenting it because I'm going to be bouncing through about 6 different tabs once we hit the live demo. So just a quick background. I've been to 5 different B-Sides, and last year I held myself accountable with a picture here. I said, okay, next year I'm going in. I'm going to go out and present what I have to share. So I committed, and recently, I'll just go down to my journey here. I wanted to break this up into several categories. January's 15 professional years experience for me. And I kind of broke them into my initial internship and then working locally at Radon under, there was essentially a Department of Defense contract work with the Army National Guard and PO Stry in Orlando from here all the way up to here. But you know, a lot of people ask me, how do I get into security? And I don't really know the demographic here. I figure most of you guys already have your feet wet, but it's hard to jump straight into security. And I wanted to generalize this enough to present to the community where, you know, in order to get up here and climb the ladder, I showed the education, and I added the different conferences and presentations that I've been involved with, presented at. So once I got my education, got the CISSP, I started diving into cloud here. So as soon as I made it here, it kind of hit me with DevOps. And then once I moved to, this is when I made it to RMS in Silicon Valley. We're across the street from Facebook. I work with a bunch of ex-Google, Microsoft, AWS guys. So I went from, you know, local, slower DoD waterfall to where I feel like I'm starting to push the limits in our field. And I really feel the need to bring it locally to Florida and really spread it throughout the country on, here's what I'm seeing, here's what we're doing. And I think it's an edge concept. So please reach out to me if you see anything here that's interesting. But, you know, I've had a computer since Windows 3.1, and, you know, I'm a lifer here. This isn't by accident. I mean, I love it. Quick background here. I love motors too. This background was me in Cozumel for my wedding moon. We did a cruise. Like James said, this was the cyber camp in Orlando. I'm assuming you can see my mouse. And then the other was a show I did in South America when I was doing my motorcycle stunts back in another lifetime before children. So goals for the presentation. I'm trying to condense a lot of information. My background, going from an intern to an architect to, you know, DevOps to a chief security officer to, you know, staff security engineer. I've had the opportunity to work with small companies and large companies. So I've had tunnel vision all the way down to a FedRAMP high authorization, and wide enough to where the image factory runs in. We have 57 Azure subscriptions, 20 some AWS accounts, and 3 VMware data centers worldwide that I'm hooked into and providing security automation for. I kind of want to go through with this crowd beyond just the technical focus, but talk about the people and the process behind that. And one of the things that I'm seeing, like I mentioned earlier, and I felt blind. I don't know if this is just spreading everywhere now or it's just my exposure to the Bay Area, but what you see in the news is a lot of, you know, the Elon stuff where you went. I think the analogy I was using last time is I've seen some of the Model T assembly lines in the early 1900s where it's got a bunch of people, you know, hammers and old tools throwing a Model T together. Fast forward 100 years later, and you've got the Tesla assembly line where you don't even see anyone. The entire thing's not the entire thing, but the majority of it's built from scratch, all through automation. And in my field, I'm seeing the same type of transition where several years ago, you know, if you wanted to build out a machine, let's say Windows XP, if you guys remember the days of stacks of CDs and driver disks, and you know, it would take days or a week to get a single server up and running and functional. And then it was like, okay, don't break it, don't touch it. Do you know how to reproduce it? Now, what I'm going to show you and demo here is that entire process in our pipeline. I ran the latest build before. It took 6 minutes to build out the server that I'm going to show you, fully automated, as code. For, you know, you could scan it with Nessus, no vulnerabilities, and it's pulling down an application, starting it and running it. So it reminds me of Homer Simpson sitting there. So instead of a bunch of sysadmin, you know, you're not going to have to put in tickets to build out servers anymore. We're going to be running those through pipelines where, hey, you want a server? Okay, give me 10 minutes. It's going to be live in production. And we'll see towards the end this went live. This was the one that took 6 minutes to build earlier. And I'm iterating here. I stamped it with the build ID. So you can see it tied here to this. So what we'll do in a little bit is we'll run this pipeline And once that's complete, it'll spin out another instance, and we'll just iterate this up to 3. So this one's currently live in an auto scaling group in AWS. A little more details later, but it's a blue-green deployment where you've got a live production instance running our .2, and then we'll kick off this build here and run .3, and then AWS has an instance refresh policy. Think of it as a light switch, where as soon as my build 3 is ready, and in this pipeline, I flip the switch. I don't flip it, the code does. We just get to sit back and watch it happen. But there's a simple job that goes in here and says, hey, go ahead and swap out the instance. It'll terminate this one. There's a warm-up period for the new one to come up. It flips the switch over, and then we'll flop over to the new one. I'll explain some of this in a little bit. But that's essentially, going back to here, think of that, several years ago for me, that process was a mission. It took a bunch of different departments, program managers, admins, network guys, configuration management, review boards. Now we have all of this entire workflow set up as code. So to back into this, DevOps, depending on who you talk to and when you talk to them, you may get a different definition. Essentially what it goes back to is just different silos. So the development team, this is an engineering, typically centered around software engineering. And another reason that I want to bring it over to us is as a security engineer, it's no longer software guys, it's us now. So at my role at RMS, I can't think of them and us, it's we. Because if it's not we, then we're not going to get the job done, and there's going to be some internal friction. So what I'm doing now to accommodate for that is I'm making security service delivery as fast, if not faster, than software delivery in order to keep up. So before, back to the, I'll go back to the XP days, even making a firewall change on a system, a guy could go out there, manually update the group policy. Now think of that as one-click code deploys it out, and it has approval gates to get there. So really, I again, Tara, I'm going to throw you out here, but what I try to do is standardize and not create silos, even for these concepts where DevOps to me is 2 pipelines, and then it's like the Venn diagram. I think I have one later, but it's the merging of any sort of 2 cross-functional teams together to come as one and implement a solution, rather than building and then field goal kicking it over to the other team and hoping for the best. I want to kind of discuss some maturity models. I think with our crowd here, you guys have been exposed. I didn't want to go too deep. These were some of the most simple. I had my younger kids look. I was trying to explain it to them, and it's like, think about like a homework assignment. You got different grade levels, and that's kind of, if you're getting audited, think of it like an A, B, C, D, F. You don't want to fail. And back to our auto scaling instance here is before, like a manual build. James, hey Rick, I need a new server. Here's your Jira ticket. Here's your GitHub issue. However you do your bug tracking. Okay, I'll build it out in a week. I'm the only guy that knows how to do it. When I do it, I just give it to another team, and then they have to finally configure it. It has to go through a configuration review process. That's essentially a lower model. It's like you're getting a D on the whole process. And then what you essentially want to do is DoD's new cybersecurity maturity model. You guys have probably seen this. If not, it's a great read. It kind of consolidates a lot of this to where it's easy to visualize in the way they broke it down. Where you start out with just basic performing, and you get all the way up to optimizing. Think of like this entire process end to end. I'm to the point now, and I mean, honestly, I probably got 30 hours or so into building all of the code, the documentation. It's by the time you get done building one single server now, you can build these. Anyone can build it. You could give this to a manager, and they can go build their own servers. And so what I'm trying to do here is show you, I've been through probably 20 or more federal audits, and we went through the so what training. Okay, you're doing this cool DevOps stuff, or you've automated this. So what? What does it mean? Why do I care? And this, if you look at it, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the NIST control set, but I threw in high level controls. So think of your build controls. So someone goes to build out any sort of piece of software. You've got the infrastructure, the platform, the software layer. How was it built? Who builds it? Who sees it? Who reviews it? And then, I'm sure you guys have been through some software audit where there's always a password embedded in a config file. And then you pass that over here, the system development lifecycle. Who owns it? Is there unit testing, integration testing, system testing? How is it measured? All the way down to when we're building out with secure baselines. Think of this beyond. We can expand. And really, what I've left this very lightweight to where what we're doing now, this symbolizes the vulnerability management piece. When we're building it, I'm just running essentially a yum update or an apt-get upgrade to where it's pulling in the latest packages. Just showing very quickly, but you essentially have a command shell here to inject anything that you want. You want to create users to implement least privilege. You want to turn on firewalls. You want to throw the sys benchmark or the STIG settings at it. You can do it here, and then anytime you run it, your system's secure. You scan it, it's latest and greatest, and you're good to go from there. So, and even to that point, a configuration management end to end, it's fully auditable down to the line of code. And then we also have system recovery and reconstitution, where if you go into the auto scaling group, I could say, hey, what's your recovery time objective? I could turn this to 2, and then you'll see another server up in about 90 seconds. Or we could spin it down, or we can refresh. And I mean, you're talking the stuff now, it's a matter of seconds. So if you were to give me an audit from any government official to audit this process, it's to the point now to where it's fun. I'm like, come on, find something, please. I'm looking for it now. Before it was like, oh no, they're coming. Now it's like, okay, come find something. I think I covered some of this, and James, what I know we're short here. This presentation took a solid hour. What I'll do is I'll kind of go through, and what I'd like to do is really open it up to the team and see where we want to dive in. I'd really like to get local feedback on what you guys think, what kind of perspective, and what I see. Go ahead.
I said you still got a good 25 minutes. So.
Oh, beautiful. So starting, what I showed here is, so DevSecOps, think of it as 4 different tiers climbing up the maturity model from DevOps, DevOps Sec, all the way to Sec DevOps. So DevOps, typically it's like I said before, it's a software engineering perspective. So every article you see is centered around getting features out the door fast, where you'll go out and you'll see, you go Google how to build out solutions, and you'll see dev guys just embedding passwords, running as administrator, no access control, no contingency. They're just whatever they can do to get the feature out fast. And from a maturity model perspective, you can't audit it. When you build out these solutions in DevOps, they're getting software out fast, but you can't pass an audit. And one of the things that I like throwing out is going through several companies, depending on what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. I mean, think about it as an applicant applying somewhere. I look at how they write the job descriptions, what their products look like, if they have any sort of security representation on their board of directors or their board. And you can kind of see what the company's doing. If they're at a DevOps maturity model and you've already made it to more of a Sec DevOps, then going into the company, you're going to have to rebuild this program from the ground up. And it takes a lot, you're more of a, how do I word this politically correct? It's You're almost like it's non-technical. For the most part, you're working with the teams to change the culture. You're a cultural evangelist. How about that? You got to go out and evangelize and sell it. When I started, I remember back in 2008, why do we even need security? Like, oh, geez, this is going to be a fun conversation. And then now, most with all the breaches in the headlines, you typically don't have to start all the way back that far. But just consider that if you're looking for a move. So so we went from just DevOps. Now we got Sec on the end. So think of an existing system, no security. Developers threw it out the door really quick. It's functional. Now your company goes, hey, we're trying to expand to government and more in cloud. Now you got to throw FedRAMP on top of it, which the moderate baseline is 325 controls. So everyone takes a deep breath and goes, wow, this is going to be a mission. So then you got an existing system. It's running as root. It's never been patched. There's no security. The firewalls are wide open. Now you got to go back and throw 1,000 technical requirements at it. Now we're getting into DevSecOps, where security finally makes it to the middle. We're at the table. We're having the conversations. And one of the things that I'm finding here is, we draw silos based on departments, and I challenge everyone to really widen that to humans in general. Most people, regardless of what position you're in, you don't want to change. You get comfortable. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my routine. That's it. Don't mess with me. If it's security, if it's a new HR process, whatever, I'm good. I don't want to mess with it. So I've kind of flipped it and looked at in the mirror on how do I come at everyone from a more neutral perspective. And it's really about a team and fundamentally going all the way left, where if you're building a security solution and you're ignoring how the operational team's going to handle it, we end up being just as guilty as any other team throwing, you're ignoring the other teams regardless, I think is what it boils down to. So it's about, if there's a new system, a new software design, whatever brand new technical thing that's being built, a new technical widget, you want to be able to partner with the right people in the organization to sit at that first kickoff call. If you make it at the table on a project kickoff of any new technical widget build, you're going to at least make it to level 3 here. You're going to skip the first 2 and you'll have a conversation. Okay, you're on board. And it's been fun for me here. Like when I go out now, I would be reluctant to go to an organization that's really just starting out, because some, depending on the size, you're talking 1 to 3 years of just getting up to a fully automated solution. And the majority of that is the cultural shift, where people don't want to change. I want to build my stuff manually. Security can't tell me what to do, that kind of stuff. So one of the things that I'm selling in my marketing hat is, and you'll see here, is security starts becoming free and invisible, where before, it was a mission. If you needed to turn a firewall rule on or you needed to patch a system, there was downtime. There was a ton of cross-functional coordination. There was a bunch of approvals. Now a lot of this is totally abstracted. It's in the code, and in GitHub, let me see if I've got it here. There's a pull request feature, and when you open a pull request, you can assign it to, let's say, configuration management lead team, and then they can go in here and review the change, or you could assign it to the software guy, whoever the consumer is. You could have them go in and review the actual lines of code in real time, and as soon as they hit submit, it merges that code and it can kick off this build automatically. So a lot of this stuff it's becoming free and transparent as long as you set it up correctly. So I kind of covered that here. So, back to the project kickoff, where once you get to Sec DevOps, not only do you have a chair at the table, you're in the captain's chair. Think of it like once you get to classified systems or like a FedRAMP high, it doesn't matter how cool the feature is. If your feature is wide open on the internet because you didn't build it correctly, or it has a critical remote code execution, security says no and it stops. And this is when for me securities gets real fun, where you kind of lead the charge, but at the same time you inherit much more responsibility too, because before, and I've seen people do, I've even self-awareness acknowledged this over time, is we allow ourselves to make excuses in DevSecOps, DevOps, and DevOps. We're seen as complainers, and I understand, going into a new org, when you spend weeks or months to build a reputation of, I'm not the guy that's just going to complain, that's just going to throw the red flag, that's just going to stop everything that you're doing. And when you get to SecDevOps, you're a leader. You have equal authority with like the CTO or the chief software engineer, where you have to get in, get your hands dirty, and build a solution that meets the demands and the speed of the software team. And those guys, they're fast. We're entering into their world, and I've enjoyed the race to keep up. It's exciting for me. The security feature balance, I think I've kind of covered that several times here. Essentially, as you go up the DevOps sec, security gets more and more weight. When you're up front in an immature organization, it doesn't really matter what you don't have an input, you don't have a say here. The feature goes out the door regardless. You could have 100 critical remote code execution vulnerabilities on an exposed server. We committed to the customer. It's got to get out the door. Someone's got to accept that risk. One of the things that I wanted to show here is the DoD, the Air Force, is driving DevSecOps hard. I'm super impressed and excited to watch what they're doing. They're helping lead and pave the way. A lot of the stuff that I get to the edge on, I look over to DoD's new leadership, and they're doing it. They're listening. They're pushing. I'm curious to hear if any of you guys are deep in any DoD software delivery projects, if you're getting a top-down push on the end-to-end DevSecOps pipeline that they're building over there. Demo time. What's our time look like, James?
Let's see, 7:13. You probably got about 20 minutes.
Beautiful. So I just coined this vulnerability management as code just to focus on a single layer. Like I said before, this Band-Aid represents a simple patching command. And all of the code is in my GitHub repo here. If you want to take a look, and I can share this, essentially it's in here, and I took a bunch of notes building out the process. So if you wanted to see how I set up my environment, the diagram, the prereqs, how to get Packers set up, Docker set up and installed, AWS command line, it still needs a little bit of work, but if you're interested in diving, it would take you a week or two to get this pipeline up, running, and functional. So back to the pipeline. What I'm going to do here, I'll run this and then speak to it. So this is Azure DevOps. I see it as a it's the conveyor belt of the widget build machine. So we're just going to hit run pipeline. Master is our master code branch in GitHub. I've got these two connected. So we just run pipeline and run. Now this it's going to a single agent. It should take, 30 seconds or less to kick off. But while this is running, I'm going to go back and walk through this diagram again. So we just launched the pipeline. It's going to hook into GitHub and all of our code, pull it in, and HashiCorp has just a single binary called Packer. And what Packer is going to do is it's going to connect to AWS and launch an EC2. The T3A is the instance type. It just defines the resource size. Okay, so we just started the job. I'll go in here, and then this is from an audit perspective. you see we're initiating the build patching step. That's the step here. And it's pulling out all of our code from GitHub, and it just started. So this green is Packer initiating the build in AWS. And if we go in here, hit refresh, we should see a new instance spinning up. So there we go. So the Packer Builder instance is initializing. And then this guy is already live. This is the .115. If you go here, this AWS .115, that's what we're connected to here. So what you see is this is going through. You just see the get updates. So this is running the app get command. And then the application stack is Docker with the AWS command line. And what this does is once this is built, it converts it to an AMI, and then it resides in an auto scaling group. I'll try and give you a quick overview of what they are, but they're amazing, really, in a nutshell. What you can do is you can define any configuration and any setting you need on a server and what's called a launch template. And then within this launch template, it's, and back to the DevOps it's the do once, reuse permanently mindset. So you go in and you say, hey, I'm using this AMI ID. It needs to be a T3. Here are the security groups, what key pair it's going to use, how it's going to be tagged, the storage size, anything that you need to run the instance manually. This does it in groups that you can turn the dial up and down. And here's essentially my application run. So as soon as the instance launches in user data, it's a full shell. So on startup, it runs this single command. And I'm starting an Nginx container that I've copied a few files to, which is this JPEG, and I update the build number. So this is your patched app. I use Docker as a simple, this can represent any application stack. And this, in step number 4, it can represent any application you want, any patches, any security configurations. Let's check back on the build. So we've already built it, patched it, and now it's shutting down the instance to create a permanent AMI out of it. So that's it. That's your build machine, patch it, install Docker, prep it. We just did that. I'm excited. I don't know about you guys. And AWS just released, not just within this year, an instance refresh option. That's the light switch I was mentioning earlier. So let's hit refresh here. Let me get back here. Okay, so as soon as this converts to an AMI, if you're impatient, you can go to AMIs and take a look. So we're spinny wheeling. And even if you're more impatient, what it does is it just creates a snapshot and stacks a little bit of data on top. And you can see it. I guess it didn't make it yet. Okay, we'll wait. Settle down. Is the experience of tab switching, is that actually coming through?
Yeah.
Okay.
In.
So it's already stopped. Let's go back here.
So of course, I'm curious if anybody else has gone out and visited your website yet. Your 3.80, 194, 115 site.
Oh, have at it. It's going to be live for.
Oh, it's live now. Yeah, it says welcome to B-Sides, build number, blah, 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 blah. It's the graphic that we're seeing there.
You've got, I don't know, maybe 5 more minutes to browse it.
Let me spin up my burp suite and see what I can. Okay.
Well, see, and so James, good conversation there while this is going. So the instance life, have you heard the dog versus cattle comparison? Pet versus cattle?
No.
So the adage now is server life. What's the life cycle of your servers?
Right.
And using this concept, we're shifting away. We're in some of our production systems, we've implemented a no patch policy. So we're forcing everyone to go fully as code, automated, adopting this framework. So, I mean, you know the dwell time. I mean, the last time I read, it was 200 plus days that cyber criminals could get. They get into your system and they sit and they wait until the opportune time and they come and get what they want.
Right.
Think about trying to get into this system. If I rotate these every 8 hours, I mean, have at it. I mean, by the time so fully patched, fully SIS, firewall, all of the config settings you can throw at it. It's up to date, and it rolls every 8 hours. Heck, it could roll every hour, every 10 minutes.
Right.
I mean, what are you going to do? It's like a moat that you keep draining, dropping, or it's a gate coming and crushing. Like it changes the entire hacking concept. I mean, I don't want to go crazy and throw it out there, but I would like to get this a little more mature, and then say, come get it. You got 10 minutes.
We'll call up the friend of the chapter, Dr. Sunny Ware, and we'll see what she can do.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fun. Well, so it would really force you to take more of a sniper approach, right?
Yeah.
Where you would need to do your recon very quick, know exactly what's running. Okay, so we built it in 6 minutes. We just hit the swap, so we're 7 minutes flat. We built it and just triggered the swap. Now this guy should have a refresh. So and then the refresh, you can define different settings in there, and I'll go show this real quick. So the warm-up period, and this is when you start introducing layers of complexity. This is a very simplistic, it's a static web server. There's no connection draining. It doesn't matter if I have light switch up and down all day. I mean, now when you get into more complex applications, it gets much more delicate. So definitely keep that in mind. I just set an instance warm up of 300 seconds. So it's going to spin the instance up. It's going to give it time to, start all the services, get rolling. This can be tuned, but that's what this policy is looking at. So it's going to go out, check to see. And then if you go back to our console, I lost it here clicking around. There we go. Okay. So did we just roll? We did. So we're already out, James. So this guy died.
Yep.
And now we have this one, which just spun up. We just switched it. And we're live. So what was that? Maybe 8-10 minutes. We went from this build over to this server. And that's it in a nutshell. This is a very simplistic example, but as you can see, for me, what we're doing now is the opportunities are just, as far as you want to take it. Really excited. Every week, our what you can do, throwing 40 hours a week at this, you think another day or two, you could have the SIS baseline applied. You could have so much more stuff locked down, installed, configured, least privileged. And then all you need to do is do it once, and then it's permanently done, available as code, and anyone in the company can run it and build it.
Good stuff.
All right, I'm gonna end it there. And
cool. Anyway, got any questions? Got a lot of thumbs up and applause. Christopher would like to speak. Go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, Rick, thanks. Very impressive piece of automation, and clearly a lot of work there. You said 30 plus hours into developing that pipeline and stuff. And I certainly see its place and its benefits and everything. But my question is around DevOps, and one of the pillars of DevOps is feedback. So when you automate so much, you have to account for some feedback when things go wrong and when things change. So when you have a huge pipeline and a lot of automation, how have you addressed your ability to make adjustments when needed?
So what a perfect example that we had this week is I don't know if you guys heard, but CentOS is no longer CentOS. Red Hat's taking that out next year, and they're changing it to CentOS Stream. So when you build the image, Packer looks for a specific line of code. It says, hey, let's go out and find CentOS. Well, it can't find it anymore. They changed the naming convention, so it broke any image that we were building using any scent flavor. It broke all of the pipelines. So the good thing about this is when you go back in and look at the build, it would get here, and it would make it to the step where it tried to find the image. So if this was a scent pipeline, it would have failed early on right here. So going in here, it would have said couldn't find the AMI name, and depending on where we're at, we just increase verbosity and then debug just like any other software piece. But I think, to add to your question is we have engineers from level 1 to level 4, and it's an organizational talent balance where the more we automate, we're taking out like level 1, 2, and some level 3 tasks. Now, you no longer need 5 to 10 engineers to do it. Now you need one that can manage the single pipeline. So you've heard of AWS's cloud adoption framework, but one of the first things they come in and set expectations on are your organization's fundamentally going to change. Your IT, that guy that is just doing basic configurations, he's probably not going to, or he needs to have a ton of training to get up to speed on how to you're going from an IT or a sysadmin role to a security engineer. And that's really the main thing that I'm seeing.
Had a couple questions come in on the chat, Rick. One was, how do you handle SSL certs?
So think of this as you can anything that you do, like when we build, let's say, so this is an Nginx server. What I could do is I could put them, and let me go here. So we use parameter store. So think of any way you can store secrets, or any way you store secure code. We could put the SSL cert in an S3 bucket and create an access policy around that. And when we run, let's say we wanted to do it in a specific module. Let's say while we're building, we have an SSL install cert. So if we go back to the code, essentially anything you can do is code, you can insert either here or right here. So you're not gonna, I wouldn't install the cert at the AMI level. I would do it during runtime in the auto scaling group. I would have it down here. So think of this as your open shell to set up whatever runtime startup configs you wanted. I would build out the code and drop it in here. That would be a very simplistic answer. But some of the things that we're doing, if you wanted to, if that was referencing a complicated example, what we have on some of our more complicated builds are when this launches, we have the instance refresh and warm up period at 10 to 20 minutes where we're connecting an Ansible configuration server where it does the more complex configurations. Like let's say it needs to do a clean SQL install or any kind of very, the more complicated installations we do during runtime, either on launch in the auto scaling group or with another CM related configuration tool.
Cool. Have the SSL at the web application firewall level. Where can one find more information on DevSecOps? I know ISC Squared's got an online course through the PI, but
I would go back to, let me see if I put it here.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.
This guy. So if you go the DoD DevSecOps reference design, this is where I pulled
that chart,
this model from. Yeah. So search Department of Defense Air Force DevSecOps, and that'll give you military grade edge. If they're not the best, they're in the top 3 for sure on design architecture.
Do me a favor, Rick. Copy your URL that you're on here for your GitHub and just paste it into the chat window. And that way folks can go check it out real quick without having to wait for me to.
Okay, got it. Chat window. Here we go.
There we go. Cool. So, folks, there's your copy of the presentation, links to that kind of stuff.
And then another. Okay, so we went through the demo.
Yep.
And okay, the final. That's take care of yourself. I think you guys spoke about that during COVID, but with depending on what role, I mean, really any security role is high pressure. My wife is a nutritionist, and we, diet, exercise, mental well-being, it all contributes. Like some of the stuff that I'm doing, I used to be, I don't know if you can see, I mean, I rode competitively, and when we would do 2-hour races, that's when I was like, okay, the diet matters. Diet and exercise make a difference, and I kind of committed. And I treat this stuff similar to, I'm competitive in nature. When I'm going in for a presentation or something, I'm making sure my diet, exercise, sleep, meditation, yoga, all that stuff's tight so I can be as performant as possible.
Good stuff. This was cool. A lot of good info, and now they got the link, and a lot of good feedback in the chat window from everybody enjoying it, and so very cool. Walter, you have a quick comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you talked about rotating your everything quickly, I know one of the other things you can also do, because it's built off an AMI, for some people who maybe aren't up to a point where they're able to build quickly, is there a way to reference that AMI? And basically, like if you're watching for vulnerabilities, and basically instead of trying to watch every single server that's spun up, you could just watch the AMI and then immediately be able to say, oh, I know the system's affected by this.
Exactly. That's the concept we're moving towards. So we've developed an AMI hunter capability. So rather than us even bothering with vulnerability scans, we do essentially you can connect CloudTrail to any sort of SIM, and then we do a query for AMI ID and name, and then we can pull in the creation date. So we have a 30-day expiration policy. So we'll scan all of our AWS accounts, and if there's an active EC2 that's using an instance over 30 days, we flag it for rotation, and then we create a ticket and it goes through a normal. So rather than someone, hey, you need to go patch WannaCry, we just say, hey, use our latest image. Here's the AMI ID, and they swap it and move on. But yeah, and to kind of take that to the next layer is think of this like any sort of production deployment, where what we do is we have a dev, a staging, and a production set. So we meaning security and infrastructure, we run this, build it out, run it through software build validation testing. So when the software team gets it, it's the Amazon experience I was mentioning earlier. I'm not trying to build something and then have them consume it and they say, oh, this version is no longer compatible, or it's outdated, or this configuration changed. I build it, I run the software on top of this stack. Think of Docker container as whatever your application suite is, and this is your security sandbox. You run it, inject the software, and then you'll know, either here in the pipe, so what we do is once we get here, we also have build validation testing jobs, or even build validation testing pipelines where, let's say we have this pipe. Let me go up another layer. Here's the build pipe. Let's say we have besides dash, server build AMI swap. You create another pipeline that handles all of your validation testing. So not only do you deliver a product that meets any end-to-end functional requirement the organization can throw at it. It's very collaborative.
Cool.
Very cool. All righty. Well, Rick, I believe your contact information's on that link that you just gave us too. So folks, if anybody's got any additional questions, you can follow up with Rick. But I'd certainly like to say thank you very much for your time, Rick, and your information and sharing it with us. And glad to finally get you presenting here at the chapter, because we've known each other for a while and been wanting to do that. So
yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. And like James said, guys, please reach out. I mean, I'm in it. I'm committed. I got kids, and like everyone, time's of the essence. But please reach out. I mean, I would love to bring this locally and start seeing our community. You know, why can't we be the next Silicon Valley? Basically, let's build solutions that they're pulling from Orlando instead of us trying to suck the information from them. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. All righty. Cool. All right, you can stop sharing. Tara, I'll let you kind of start setting up your screen sharing there while I introduce you. But real excited to have Tara Hughes presenting with us. That originally we thought she was connecting from California, but she's suffering the miserable life in Hawaii right now. So, but we are real excited that she is joining us, talking about imposter syndrome. And I know this is a big issue with a lot of folks in our industry as well as other industries. But this, I had asked the board members, hey, let's get some other speakers in that we may not otherwise be able to have, because we are doing these virtually. And Christopher had seen Tara speak at a previous conference. And so let's see if she'll want to present to the chapter. And lo and behold, she's here with us this evening. So I'm real excited to welcome Tara. And we're apparently all a bunch of phonies. So Tara, take it away.
Thank you. Gosh, that comes across way more aggressive than I intended it to. Well, thank you all so much for letting me join you today. I thought I might start out with sharing a little bit of a story. I think it helps frame a little bit of the discussion that we'll have today. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Neil Gaiman, but he is an award-winning author. He has written a number of really successful novels, Coraline, Stardust, Neverwhere, American Gods. I think those are just a small bit of them. And he tells a story that I think is just incredibly helpful in thinking about imposter syndrome. So he talks about how he had been invited to a very prestigious event a number of years ago. And over the course of a few days, he feels as though he just does not belong there. That, at some point, this giant spotlight is going to shine down on him and he will be identified as an infiltrator because he doesn't belong in that room. This is a room full of very accomplished people in their respective careers. There's authors and musicians and researchers and scientists and people who have discovered things. And he feels like he really does not belong there. So he shares how one evening he's standing towards the back of the room and he strikes up a conversation with an older gentleman who happens to share the same first name as him. And they're talking, and the older Neil looks over at him and says, I just look around this room full of all of these incredibly successful people, and I think, how in the heck did I get invited here? All I did was go where I was sent. And Gaiman is really struck by this and looks over at him and says, yeah, but you were the first man to walk on the moon. I think that counts for something. Gaiman goes on to say that interaction had a profound impact on him, because if Neil freaking Armstrong felt like he didn't belong in that space with those people, the first man to walk on the moon had doubts as to whether he had achieved success that was legitimate enough to be recognized among his peers, then maybe we all struggle with that a little bit, and maybe that's okay for us to recognize and talk about it. So with that in mind, what if I were to tell you that there were employees in your organization who are hardworking, high performers, who will never ask for a raise, they will never ask for a promotion? I think some people, maybe especially our budget analysts, might think that that would be a really awesome problem to have. But what if I were to tell you that you need to find a way to stop it, that it's critical to the success of your organization to find a way to stop it? So imposter syndrome is a psychological term referring to a pattern of behavior where people doubt their accomplishments, and they have this consistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fake or a fraud. It was first discovered in the early 1970s by two remarkable psychologists, Dr. Suzanne Imes and Dr. Pauline Rose Clance. And what they found was that people who struggle with imposter syndrome have a sense that they don't belong in the spaces that they occupy. And that these are people who tend to most likely struggle with this are actually your top performers. These are your high achievers. And yet it's the high achievers who experience a significant amount of success who really question the merits of their success. And in fact, they often attribute their success to luck. And just like the slot machine, they really believe that eventually their luck is going to run out. And when it does, the consequences will be severe. You know, for some people, that would mean potentially losing their job if they're discovered to be the fake that they believe themselves to be. For others, that might mean losing the respect of their peers, which for some people, that's even more significant of a loss. So with that in mind, I want to talk about knowledge workers. You know, knowledge workers are people who work in fields where their stock and trade is what they know. And this is really different from other occupations where you have something that's a tangible result of your hard work and effort. That at the end of whatever you've been working on, you have something physical and tangible to show for it. When I worked at Starbucks when I was in high school, I had a tangible result for my hard work and effort. I made our coffee drinks, right? And that was measurable. But knowledge is not like that. Knowledge is opaque and it's much harder to quantify, and therefore it's difficult to make comparisons. So let me give you a for instance. I feel like that might be helpful because, again, it's hard to even talk in these terms with knowledge being so kind of abstract. My great-grandparents immigrated from Spain to Hawaii, and they came over to work as sugarcane pickers in the sugarcane fields. And I have to confess, I haven't done a ton of research on the art of picking sugarcane, but I'm pretty sure if I wanted to know who had done the best job at the end of the day, all I would have to do is see who had picked the most sugarcane. We don't have the same luxury with knowledge in terms of identifying how much other people know, what do they know, and vice versa, for them to be able to make those determinations about us, which means that we don't have an equal ability to make accurate comparisons when it comes to knowledge. And that's really important because people who struggle with imposter syndrome, the way that they think about knowledge is really critical. Someone who struggles with imposter syndrome, they really see things in terms of knowledge that the knowledge that they possess is absolutely dwarfed in comparison by what everyone else knows. They really believe that everyone else possesses a much greater amount of knowledge that is vast in comparison to the knowledge that they possess, and that theirs is just simply minute in comparison. And the reality is that that's not true, right? There are things that I know that are unique to me, and there are things that I know that maybe you don't know. And then there's things that you know that I know, and our knowledge overlaps. And then there's things that you know that perhaps your colleague or the person next to you knows, but that I don't. And that's kind of the domino effect, right? But someone who is struggling with imposter syndrome, they don't see knowledge that way, or they don't recognize that knowledge is more evenly distributed, and it really impacts the way that they view themselves and the way that they view other people. And I think, just as a brief aside, I also just think that this illustration is a really great example of what a diverse team should look like, right? We should all have unique knowledge and skills that we bring to the table, where we can both fill in the gaps, but also complement one another and the things that we're contributing towards. Okay, so that brings me to IT. I think when we think about information technology, I think knowledge workers absolutely fit within the scope of IT. And in fact, Blind did this poll of their users who are actually tech workers in their platform. And they surveyed over 10,000 of their users, and they asked them, do you struggle with imposter syndrome, or do you feel like an imposter? Over 50% said yes. And I want to point out that these are not small mom and pop shops. So many of the companies listed here are really titans of the industry. And in order to acquire that kind of cachet and to be a titan of the industry and lead the way in technical innovation, they need the best of the best. And yet the best of the best is saying, I'm not sure that I'm good enough. There was one Salesforce employee who said that even after working there for 14 years, he felt like a fraud. And I just think that's such an incredible thing to think about. And if that's true of information technology in a broad sense, I wonder how much more true that is in the sphere of information security. And so that makes me wonder, what is it about information security, or that might actually make you wonder, what leads people in information security to be more vulnerable to feeling like an imposter? And I think that's a really good and important question. So first is that information security is an incredibly fast-paced field. It's really changing so much, so quickly. There's been research that has found that imposter syndrome ties to things that are brand new or are new endeavors. And I do think that information security fits that. You know, Rick even talked about how at one point information security was even questioned as to whether or not that should be included, right? So we're certainly making progress in terms of seeing a number of instances why I think people aren't wondering anymore why information security is important, but it still is something that is taking time for people to fully understand and really be committed to its full integration, right? And I think the other part of that is that there's so much that's changing so quickly. You know, what you know now may no longer be relevant in 5 to 10 years. And I think, you know, what you knew 5 to 10 years ago isn't as helpful to you now, right? And so there's just this very quick rate of change that occurs. And it's hard to feel not even like you're at the top of it, but just that you're trying to keep up because things are changing so much. And so you have something that's still finding its way, and it's also something that continues to evolve. And while that really drives the industry to constantly be learning and developing and keeping things up to date, it does come at a cost, right? That feeling of always having to be on and never knowing quite enough can really drive feelings of anxiety and not feeling good enough, especially when you also have this sticky little situation of knowing that there are threat actors who are financially motivated to do whatever they can to just wreak havoc and steal information and do all sorts of other things that are really just unhelpful to the work that we're trying to do, right? And so all of those different things contribute to a really, really tough pace to keep up with. The other thing is that information security is a melting pot. You know, no two career paths seem to look the same. And I think that's awesome for having a really diverse and rich field of people, but it also makes it challenging to have any kind of benchmark for what does a successful career path in information security look like. Can also be really difficult to gauge whether or not you're being successful because so much success is dependent on really countless other factors. You know, one institution may have really fabulous security policies and procedures in place and still experience a number of breaches and threats, right? And then another institution can have really weak security systems and policies and structures, and then they can stay problem-free. So those things don't necessarily give an accurate representation of the work that's being done and the efforts that are being contributing in those areas. But I still want to give a little bit of an illustration that might help drive this point home. So I made my very own handy dandy tiger spray, and I've been spraying it all over every day for the past several days. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that I have not been bitten by a tiger in all the time that I've been spraying this on. And I haven't even seen a tiger. So clearly it's the tiger spray that is being effective in repelling tigers, right? I think that that is, to some degree, it's silly, but it's a good illustration of illustrating that the absence of something does not guarantee whether you are being effective or successful. And so often we can make erroneous conclusions because we're using that line of thinking. So we've talked a little bit about what imposter syndrome is and why it's important to talk about it, but it's also really important to recognize that imposter syndrome does not happen in a vacuum. It has side effects or consequences, and side effects are not just negative for the individual person who's struggling with it. It can also really have a negative impact on the organization as a whole. So I think it's important to kind of review some of those. One of the negative side effects it can have is it can really cause people to be risk averse. You know, we talked about how information security is really an area that is fast-paced, right? And it's changing. And when it's changing, that also means that you have to be willing to try new things, right? And if you're not willing to try new things because you're afraid of failure, that's not good news, and very likely will leave you behind at some point because you can't keep up with those changes. So you have to be willing to at least try new things, right? It can also cause people to be secretive. And I just want to stop real quick and make sure, are my slides still good? Are you seeing what I'm sharing here? Okay, good. So in causing people to be a little bit more secretive, you know, one of the things that I've heard consistently at really a variety of conferences is when people are talking about what a successful information security team looks like, or what are some really intrinsic qualities of a good security team. And the two things that consistently win out are transparency and integrity. And if you are being secretive because you're afraid of showing any kind of flaw, even if it's not necessarily one that you are responsible for, but a flaw nonetheless, and you're afraid of what that might say about you or your project or your team, that can really cause a lot of problems. It's really important to be transparent, and withholding information is definitely something that is not helpful to, I think, especially what information security often tries to accomplish. And then I think related to that is not only do people tend to be secretive, but they also tend to isolate. Because if I'm not telling you things and I'm not collaborating with you, it's a lot easier for me to hide and conceal those things that I am afraid for you to discover, that I think might prove my inadequacy or inability to be seen as a reputable person. So I think we've established, those are just a few things, but I think that they're all pretty significant in really showing that imposter syndrome it's a thing that can really affect people, particularly in information security, and it's not a good thing. It can really have some negative consequences. But it's really not enough to stop there. We also have to be able to know how to identify it, whether it's in ourselves or in our teams or in people we might be mentoring. We need to be able to know what are markers of it, what should we be looking for. And so before I get into those specific flags, I want to stop and just highlight that Valerie Young is an individual who has done a lot of really excellent work in the area of imposter syndrome. And she's just done a lot. She's written a book, she's done the speaker circuit, she's got a blog, and she has really helpfully identified some markers that are typically found with people who struggle with imposter syndrome. And so the next points are really in thanks to her and the work that she has done. So the first is perfectionism. And I just have to say that this is one that I just really struggle with. I am 100% a perfectionist. And, you know, even in doing a presentation like this, it's hard to not let it eat me up every single time I make some mistake. Either there's not a transition to the next slide the way that I wanted it to do, or I went too fast, or whatever the case, every time I screw up. And so inevitably there will probably be some screw up that I'm not super happy about with this presentation, but that makes it really hard to then identify anything that went well, because a perfectionist is someone who, no matter how much success they enjoy or how much they accomplish, they really tend to focus on even the most minute amount that needed to be improved or could have been better. And I think the challenge with that is that you tend to get some really excellent work from people who are perfectionists, but they tend to fail to acknowledge or appreciate their own successes because they have such a narrow focus on what they're trying to accomplish, and they don't stop and appreciate maybe that 90% that they accomplished. They're focused on that 10% that could have been better. And it really robs you of whatever joy you may have found in your work. But it can also really take away from being able to think about not just your own successes, but celebrating the successes of your team and the people that you're working with. The other is what Valerie Young dubs as Superman or Superwoman, this superhero idea where individuals really have to go above and beyond in literally everything they do. It does not matter where you look, they are there, they're involved, they're saving the day. They're individuals, I think, who they share a lot of commonality with perfectionists, which I am guilty as charged. And they're not just trying to prove to other people that they're good enough, they're really trying to prove to themselves that they're good enough. And because typically they have that perfectionist mentality, the problem is they're never going to successfully prove to themselves that they're good enough. So they're always going to be striving. They're always going to be trying to do better because they're never going to reach that perfect 100%. A lot of research has shown that people who really struggle with perfectionism and being that superhero are also people more likely to struggle with burnout and depression. And if you have stellar employees like this, or if you're that stellar employee, especially I think given the current state of things, you really want to make sure that you don't get to that place or that your team doesn't get to that place. So it's really important to understand what these trademarks are and to be able to come alongside those folks and help them achieve excellence without burning themselves out. Oh, how did that get there? Natural genius. So, you know, natural geniuses are people who have experienced a lot of success fairly easily. And so when they eventually encounter difficulty or resistance, because life, right? You can't avoid it forever. They think that it's those challenges that are an indicator of being a fake or a fraud, because up until this point, they've experienced so much success that once they do, that must indicate that something's not right, that they don't belong, or that they're the ones that are faking their way. And then soloists. Soloists are people who really believe that in order to be seen as valuable and legitimate, they have to go it alone. That if they need to partner with other people, if they are only able to achieve success because they've received help from other people collaborating with them, then they themselves are not good enough, because if they were good enough, they should have been able to do it on their own. And experts. And I'm going to camp out on this one just for a little bit, because there's a couple different ways that I think are important for us to consider. So the first, and that Valerie really identifies with experts, is, these are people who, before they're willing to participate in a project or a discussion, they have to know absolutely every detail. And they also tend to shy away from asking questions because they're afraid of how that might make them appear less intelligent. And so they're really difficult to participate with on certain things. But the other side of this that I think is really interesting and important to consider is, there are people, and I'm definitely included in this, who have worked their way up. I think most of us can say that we've worked our way up to varying degrees. And you eventually, as you work up, you begin receiving certain labels in your title, right? There's expert, teacher, manager, maybe director. And these labels definitely give a certain sense of expectation, I think, for sure in other people's minds, but I think even more in our own minds. And this expectation tends to set us up for what do we expect of ourselves and how well we should be performing our work. So as I am wont to do, I love illustrations. So we're going to go get an illustration. So we have our regular information security friend, we'll call him Joe. And as you can see, Joe has a variety of skills, right? Some he's really good at, others that maybe aren't in his wheelhouse, but he can definitely get the job done. And then let's say we give Joe the title of expert. And suddenly, Joe grows a Linux beard overnight, and he gains godlike powers and knowledge in all the things. And suddenly, an expert label means that he is the best at everything, even though 2 days prior, that wasn't the case. Sorry, I know this is so silly. But I think it's important to consider the challenge of this, that those of us still working our way up in our careers, this expectation that we can build for ourselves because of a label like expert, and recognizing that this is not how it works. And it's really an unfair expectation of ourselves and the work that we do. And yet, I know, at least for me, I totally have fallen into this category of, as soon as I got the title of manager, I had this overwhelming expectation of suddenly I'm supposed to be instantly good at things that 2 days ago I was still learning, right? So I think that, whether it's applied to yourself or even for your team, it's really important to be very aware of terms like this and what kind of expectations do they create in others and in ourselves. This slide is just a small sampling of words from the A category in the NSIT Dictionary of Security Terms. And I really want to emphasize that this is just the A group. And it's just a small section of the A group. Now, if our expectation is that we receive the label of expert like Joe did, and you expect to be an expert in all things cybersecurity, I think the sad news is that I don't think it's possible to be a perfect expert in the top 2 lines, let alone this entire group. Never mind A to Z. Like, that would just make me want to cry because there's so many terms. That is literally not possible. And yet that really tends to be the expectation we place on ourselves, which can contribute to feeling like we're a fake when we then don't live up to that expectation. And I think that, you could replace this slide with leadership terms or any kind of terms that have something to do with professional development or characteristics of whatever role you might have. And it's going to have that same impact, right? It's just, there's so much. You can't possibly be perfect at everything all of the time. And so if I were just to leave it there, this would be the most ultimate depressing presentation ever. And so I won't leave it there. And I do think there are some really helpful things that can be employed to combat imposter syndrome. And so I definitely want to share those with you. But before I do want to just give my disclaimer. I am not a doctor or professional in terms of really diving into imposter syndrome and eradicating it fully. But I have done a lot of research and a lot of work looking into strategies to combat imposter syndrome. And it's not just so I can give a really well thought out presentation, though that certainly is a motivation, but it's also for my own benefit as I work through eradicating and struggling against imposter syndrome myself. So these are definitely all tips that I've been employing in my own experience as well. But hopefully this is just a really good conversation starter too. If anything within this presentation is something that kind of just pings at you, I really encourage you to reach out to someone and talk, because imposter syndrome really thrives on the secrecy and keeping things to yourself. And so just talking about it, at least in my experience, seems to really open the floodgates of relief. So I definitely encourage you to do that. Okay, so the first strategy I want to talk about is comparisons and not comparing yourself. We talked a little bit about the challenge of making comparisons in the knowledge that we all possess, and how we often don't do a very good job of it because it's really hard to make good comparisons when we're trying to compare things that really don't have something that's quantifiable or measurable like knowledge. But I love my illustrations, so please forgive me as I tarry on with more. And this one's a little older, but it's just one that I love so very much, so we're gonna stick with my football illustration. So Cam Newton, a few seasons ago, he averaged 40 rushing yards per game, which for a quarterback is a really fantastic statistic. Compare that to our mystery quarterback, who only averaged 3.5 rushing yards per game, which is really pathetic. And in comparison to Cam, it's really obvious that Cam Newton is the superior quarterback. Until we see that our mystery quarterback is Tom Brady, who is a 6-time Super Bowl champion, a 4-time Super Bowl MVP, and 3-time NFL MVP. And regardless of which football team you're a fan of, if you're a fan of football, it's really undeniable that he is a wildly successful quarterback. The reason why this illustration is so important is that so often we try to make comparisons with really narrow sets of data, and it often leads us to making erroneous conclusions. So don't compare yourself. Reframe your thoughts. So again, from a really personal point of view, when I've been asked to share this presentation, I've definitely struggled with wondering why anyone would want to hear what I have to say. Like, who am I to talk about this? Like, I'm some sort of expert, right? Here we go again with those labels. And, you know, it's really easy to allow the negative thoughts to govern my mind. And I have to really stop and put those thoughts in check and push back against them, and then reframe them. some of the research that I've read talks about how the way that someone who has imposter syndrome, the way that they struggle with imposter syndrome versus someone who doesn't, is that they approach challenges differently. So someone who struggles with imposter syndrome, they really view challenges as something that's scary, and it's an opportunity to fail. And they don't want to fail, especially if you're that perfectionist, right? Whereas someone who doesn't have that imposter mentality or struggle with that, they really see things as a welcomed challenge, where challenges or things that maybe they're not aware of or maybe just require some struggle, those are opportunities to learn and grow, and they don't see that negatively, even if in the end it doesn't go maybe the way that they want. Whether it's a positive or negative outcome, the benefit of what they've learned through that experience is positive for them. And so I think having a very different approach in the way that you think about those things is really important. Things are not as negative as I might tend to perceive them to be. And I have to really change what's going inside my mind and the way that I think about things before anything's going to change outwardly. Our thoughts just have so much more of an impact over our actions than I think we tend to realize. And so really spending time to dig in to what am I thinking about, what's governing my thoughts, and reframing those thoughts if they're leading me towards either those actions that are not helpful or are indicative of really being either harmful to myself or to others in the organization because I am afraid. Acknowledge your successes. And I think that's a really perfect segue from reframing your thoughts, because again, like I talked about with struggling with perfectionism and how it's really difficult for me to acknowledge my success. I always want to be perfect. I want to every single time hit it out of the park. And so I'm always going to zero in on the one thing that didn't go the way that I wanted, or even if it wasn't bad, even if it just was okay. Like to me, it's like, no, that's not good enough. It's got to be perfect. But to really combat those feelings of imposter syndrome, I have to really stop and take stock of what did I do well. So often, I gloss over that and I don't really take the time to think about what are things that are going right. What are things that we've achieved? This has been especially helpful during the whole pandemic, right? Because there has been a lot expected of everyone. And it's such a disservice to ourselves and to each other to not really acknowledge fully the weight of what has been placed on our plates and what we've been able to accomplish. And so I think it's really critical to acknowledge what have you done well? What are you being successful at? And the other part of that is that, and I mentioned this earlier with the perfectionism, is that, if I'm not taking the time to be really intentional in thinking about what I'm doing well, and maybe that's a list, right? I think sometimes if we leave it to being anecdotal, it doesn't happen. So making a list of both big and small wins is really important, because if I'm not doing it for me, I'm probably not doing it for my team, or I'm not doing it consistently. And that's really important. And, even the idea of really having what is it, when you're on an airplane and you have to put your mask on yourself before you can help other people, being able to acknowledge my success and be okay with saying, you know what, I did do that well. No, it wasn't perfect, but that was a really good job. I'm proud of this. Just that habit, it makes it so much easier to also then say, and you did a really good job at this, right? Like you start to become very generous with the acknowledgement that you share in identifying people's success. And I think that's a really good habit to create. We're in the home stretch. Find a mentor. This will probably be my soapbox till I am no longer invited to speak anywhere. Having mentors is incredibly important. There's a lot of research that has shown that mentors and coaches and champions are all really critical to success, regardless of where you're at in your career. And I know for me, I really can't say just how many people who have been mentors and friends and those advisors who have encouraged me every step of the way in my career journey, just telling me you can do it. When I first gave this presentation, it was at the EDUCAUSE Security Professionals Conference. And at the time I was managing our IT help desk and shared services. And a very dear friend of mine who is a CISO said, you should submit a presentation to SPC. And I was like, but I don't do security. I'm like tangentially related. And he was like, you should do it anyways. And I was like, who wants to listen to me? And he's like, you should talk about that. And here we are today. You know, just the encouragement from people who have been able to help me identify when my fears are irrational, who have encouraged me to step outside my comfort zone and try new things. Those have all been incredible game changers for me, to be quite honest. And when there is an area that needs improvement, they hold me accountable, but they don't let me just kind of flail around in all of my negativity. It's very intentional, and they hold me accountable to what are you going to do about it? So having a mentor, I just think is so critical. But I would say not just stopping there with having a mentor, but be a mentor. I have those people who genuinely care about my success and development. And it would honestly be a shame if I did all of this taking and didn't pay it forward and give back. You know, so often imposter syndrome, I don't know if you've noticed, but it focuses on one person, and it's me, right? Me, myself, and I. Everything that I'm thinking about is focused on me and how I'm doing and how I'm being perceived and how I am or am not successful. And so when I shift my focus onto other people, it immediately changes the dialogue in my mind, and it changes the focus so that I'm not just wrapped up with myself, I'm concerned about someone else and their well-being. And for the folks who have poured so much into me and given me a vision that I didn't have for myself, now I get to help create vision and encouragement for someone else, which I just think is there anything better than that? It's hard to think of that, but it's so worth it. So focus on other people and really look for people to mentor and encourage. Be a lifelong learner. You know, for those of us who work in higher education, as corny as this may sound, every day really is a school day. And yet I think so often, you know, the further we get into our careers, we lose that enthusiasm to learn, where instead of seeing something I didn't know and thinking, oh my gosh, that's so cool, I didn't know that. Now the default tends to be, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. They're going to think that I'm an idiot or that I'm incapable and incompetent. And then they're going to think, well, how did she get that position? Right. And it just leads you down like this really bad road. And so changing, again, I think it's kind of coupled with reframing your thoughts, but really changing my attitude towards when I don't know something to being curious and wanting to be a learner and a student, because I'm never going to know all the things, right? And so this is really a game changer for me in approaching things with enthusiasm and curiosity. And it makes it less about me and more about the work and the interesting things that are happening. Face your fear. So often I want my feelings to kind of lead the way before I'm willing to do the scary thing and make it not scary anymore. But that's just not how it works. Really, the reality is that behavior drives feelings, and feelings are almost always the last to change. So you have to feel the fear You have to acknowledge that it's there. I'm not saying, just pretend that nothing exists, but you have to feel the fear and do it anyways. And I had kind of a silly story, but I think given that time is running lower, I will just say that when you face your fear, whether it's going on a scary roller coaster like I did with my best friend for our 30th birthday, you learn something about yourself that amazingly can be applied in a lot of other areas. So if there's something scary or that you're really fearing in your work, sometimes it's really helpful to face a fear in a totally unrelated thing, because the confidence that you gain and the ability of proving to yourself that you can do this scary thing translates over into, I can do this other scary thing too. And the last thing that I would just say is to keep going. So much of just being able to be successful is just showing up and persevering and keep trying, even if I don't always feel like I deserve it or that I measure up to whatever standard I have for myself. Keep going. There are people watching, especially if you're mentoring people, and you are more likely inspiring people through your grit and determination to keep fighting through that. And that is absolutely worthwhile. And then this is just one of my favorite quotes that I like to end on. It's really just been incredibly impactful for me, particularly something I return to when I am struggling with feeling like an imposter. And it's from Winston Churchill. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And that is it.
Cool. And their contact information, LinkedIn, Twitter. Oh, lost it.
I did lose it. I'm sorry, but I can put it in the chat too.
Okay. Can we share the presentation with the members?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You can just send me a PDF and that will be awesome. Cool. Any comments, any questions? Oh, here we go. We got some coming in here. Maureen, loved the presentation. David, how do you compare imposter syndrome to emotional intelligence or lack thereof? Do you see the latter as a solution to the former?
That's a really good question. I think with emotional intelligence, there's certainly a self-awareness that comes with that, right? And I think that for me, even in preparing this presentation, a year and a half ago, my EQ grew simply because of the research and being able to identify, oh, I see that in myself, but also, again, having the mentors there who can help kind of pinpoint maybe some of those sticky spots too. And so I think the self-awareness that comes with emotional intelligence is important. I don't think that someone who struggles with imposter syndrome lacks emotional intelligence necessarily, though. I don't know if that makes sense. But I do think that EQ can help in combating it more successfully.
Cool. Christopher, question?
Yeah. Hey, Tara, thanks. A lot of really great stuff there. Right now, I'm working as a security architect, which is kind of a high technical achieving role. I pride myself in having a lot of experience and a lot of expertise in technical areas, and I kind of thrive on that being the solution guy, the answer guy, kind of like that soloist, right? I want to be the one that comes in and fixes and solves the day, but my boss keeps coming to me and saying, have you thought about management? You could really do well in management. So now I've got this fear, and this decision is how do I wrestle with that idea of moving from technical roles into management roles?
Yeah, again, that's true regardless, right? Whether it's in IT or HR or anything, that leap into management is challenging, particularly if you really like the work. I think one of the things that's so interesting about moving from the one role to the next is that there's this perception that you lose the things that defined who you were, right? And yet I think that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing sort of deal, right? It's not a trade-off of, well, now that I don't get to do that specific work, who am I? And I'm not doing anything as important, right? Now you get to manage all the people doing all the cool stuff, and you get to lead and contribute in different, again, it's reframing the way that you're thinking about it, I think.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions or comments from the folks in the audience, the attendees? So rapidly, maybe feverishly typing. I don't know. It doesn't tell me if anybody's typing. First of all, that was fantastic. Like I said, I read a book over the weekend about imposter syndrome written by a social engineering expert, analyst. Anyway, and very similar concepts that you provided. So now his book's got a little more weight in aligning with what you were talking about, Tara. So greatly appreciate that. So once I get the presentation from Tara, I will share it out. I'll send an email out. Everybody's already got Rick's because he had it in the chat. If you don't see it, scroll up and you'll see the link. But really do appreciate, Tara, your time taken away from, having to enjoy the beaches there in Hawaii. All right. So again, a big special thank you to Rick and Tara for closing out our 2020 year of presentations. Looking forward to what we do with 2021. Registration is already opened up for the January 25th event. Like I said, we've already got one speaker. I'm working on another one. So if anybody has somebody in mind or a topic or whatever, let us know. I will probably be asking around and checking with other colleagues around the country or maybe even around the world to see who we can have present for us January and February. If you're new to the group, you can sign up at the chapter. There's our websites. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. Also, just want to wish everyone from the board a very happy holidays, a very safe holidays. This is a time where we spend with family, and I know it's going to be difficult that we may not be able to do that. Some of us are stuck in Hawaii, so, we can only feel so sorry for those folks. No, in all honesty, I want to wish everybody a festive holiday that they can with the close ones that they have here in town. As I said, I've opened up the registration for the January 25th event. I'll start sending out the emails after the new year to get folks to sign up and register, reminding everybody. But basically, the fourth Monday of every month is when we will do our chapter meetings. So again, thank you to Rick and Tara. Fantastic presentations, great information. And wish everybody a wonderful evening, a great week, and we will see you all in 2021.
Sounds good. Thanks, James. Tara,
Thanks
for having us. Appreciate it.